Welcome to the Adelaide International Women's Day breakfast. Lifecare is delighted to be a gold sponsor of today's event. The aged care sector is a vital sector in which women are predominantly the leaders and drive the sector forward. And it's essential that we take time to recognise the work that you do in making a difference in vulnerable South Australians' lives. We are proud to announce the launch of Adelaide's first premium assisted living product, the Gaines Park Suites. In our assisted living apartments, people live in a really spacious, well-appointed apartment on their terms, come and go as they please, with a range of services that include cooking, cleaning, heavy laundry and maintenance services, and an emergency call service. Our premium suites have been designed with kitchen, dining and living areas and come in an option of 1 or 2 bedrooms. Our communal spaces have been designed to be shared by friends and family. Spaces include lounge, library, games room, cinema room and our beautiful gardens with barbecue areas. And the Four Seasons restaurant, where lunch and dinner are served by menus designed by our executive 5-star chef, Bethany Finn. Thank you for choosing to be part of today's International Women's Day breakfast. I truly hope you enjoy it.
I choose to challenge our field-based operations to bring more women into leadership roles.
I choose to challenge gender stereotyping.
I choose to challenge that time and time again, I'm the only woman in the meeting.
I choose to challenge our workforce to assist developing the skills of our wonderful female employees within our organisation.
I choose to challenge to create opportunities for the First Nations women because they are underrepresented in the workforce.
I choose to challenge domestic violence. No woman should feel unsafe in their own home.
I choose to challenge gender stereotypes and bias because I believe we all deserve to live in a world where we have the same opportunities.
I choose to challenge my current self, my fears and insecurities, because I want to be the best version of myself.
I choose to challenge because I think it's important that our people better reflect the diverse communities we serve and that we take proactive steps towards that.
Here at SA Power Networks, we take diversity and inclusion seriously, and that's why this year for International Women's Day, we're joining in the Choose to Challenge. So please join in and think about what you might want to choose to challenge.
Happy International Women's Day. Today is a great day of recognition for women and especially for those who continue to make a positive contribution to the smooth running of our nation's major businesses.
Happy International Women's Day!
International Women's Day is a day to honour and celebrate the women in my life and throughout history who've given me the rights and the opportunities that I have today while reflecting on how far there still is to go.
Happy International Women's Day!
Happy International Women's Day!
Happy International Women's Day!
Happy International Women's Day!
International Women's Day is an opportunity to focus on the positive and to reflect on all of the many ways that women have made the world a better place. Embrace the positive. Happy International Women's Day.
I'm so pleased we have one day that we recognize the contributions of women because they are so often overlooked. So I urge you to recognize the women that you work with and thank them because they are awesome.
Happy International Women's Day. To me, the day means celebrating all of the amazing women that have gone before us and reminding all women and girls that we deserve a seat at the table.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.
Hi, happy International Women's Day. It's a fantastic opportunity to celebrate, to stand up, to speak out, to sing joyfully and to think about all the things we achieve as women and we achieve them together.
What defines a generation?
Climate justice, right now.
Is it just about the year you were born? Or is there something more? We may have lived through different decades, different circumstances, different countries. but we all share in the global, everyday push for our rights, for justice, for a world that is equal. Perhaps what defines our generation isn't our age or our background, but the line in the sand that we have drawn. We take to the streets to speak out against discrimination, and we work tirelessly behind the scenes. We stand up for peace.
We are fed up with the war
and economic justice. We start with a statement and watch it become a movement. We have come a long way, but the fight isn't over, and our rights are still under assault. It is time to take action. Let us be the wake-up call the world needs.
The eyes of all future generations are upon you.
Be the first, the youngest, the best, and then make sure no one is left behind. When someone tries to silence you, raise up your voice.
Let us wage a global struggle.
Change everything, or change just one thing. As long as you do something, whether you're new to changing the world or have been in the fight for a long time.
Each knows exactly why we are here.
We are all together, united for gender equality. And the future we create for women and girls is up to all of us.
Good morning and welcome everybody to Adelaide International Women's Day Breakfast for 2021. My name is Sonia Feldhoff from ABC Radio Adelaide, and it's my great pleasure to be with you again this year, albeit a little bit differently. Of course, March 8th, Monday, March 8th, is in fact International Women's Day. But as always, we mark it on the first Friday of March. And today we mark the 29th year of the Adelaide International Women's Day breakfasts. A great history in these breakfasts, and it's wonderful to have you joining us in this way. Now, proceeds from today's event will go to the UN Women Australia. And if you're active on social media this morning, wherever you are, we would love to see your photos and videos, the way you are marking our International Women's Day breakfast here in Adelaide today. So please use the tags hashtag IWD 2021 and hashtag Women Lead. Right now, though, if I could invite to the podium Rosemary Wanganeen. She would like to welcome you here to this breakfast in a very special way. Rosemary Wanganeen.
First of all, I would like to say thank you very much to Senator Penny Wong and the Adelaide International Women's Day Committee for inviting me again to perform Welcome to Ghana Country at this very special event, International Women's Day 2021. It's been an honour and a privilege to perform them, as it enables us to connect to what I consider an ancient practice of women's business. In so doing, we're disseminating powerful, sacred, healing women's energy amongst ourselves. It's always an honour and a privilege to perform Welcome to Ghana Country, as it enables me to acknowledge my Ghana ancestry and ancestors on my dad's side. On my mother's side, my Wirrungor ancestry and ancestors from the west coast of South Australia. So where possible, I like to use my Welcome to Country to incorporate an educational component. For example, the Ghana word namani would ask you as a group of people, are you all well? And in response, you would reply, mani adlu. And mani adlu simply means we're all well. So my formal welcome, on behalf of myself and my Ghana ancestors, namani. And many more aren't aware that Ghana country is far and wide. If you imagine a wheel and 9 spokes, and the city of Adelaide is the hub. These spokes approximately extend into the following places: Crystal Brook, which is about 2 hours north of Adelaide, then back down in a southeasterly direction into Clare, which is about 1.5 hours from Adelaide. Still in a southerly direction into Clare, into Gawler, and follow the foothills of the Mount Lofty Ranges, continuing in a southerly direction to the south coast to the Fleurieu Peninsula into Cape Jervis, about 1.5 hours from Adelaide. And to complete the circle, we'll turn around and head north up the Gulf of St Vincent, past Adelaide, into Port Wakefield, Port Broughton, and back into Crystal Brook. Furthermore, many aren't aware that the top of the Mount Lofty Ranges is the country of the Purumang people. My welcome always acknowledges my gratitude for the sharing of modern Australia. However, I also acknowledge my deepest sadness for the human cost to us as Aboriginal people for this sharing, and that all Aboriginal ancestors did not surrender sovereignty of their traditional lands, sea and culture, but realising and I hope it'll always be we, all have a right, a role and a responsibility to be a part of the reconciliation process. In so doing, recognising each other's humanity so we can move forward as one nation to a place of equity, justice and in partnership together as contemporary Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australians for the health and well-being of our future generations under our Great Southern Cross. Our nation of Australians have many cultural identities. So when we walk upon Kaurna country, our Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal ancestors ask us to recognise each other's humanity and to tread gently, not just upon Kaurna country, but upon the whole of our continent and upon Mother Earth. Thank you for all wanting to honour my ancestry and ancestors, the Kaurna people and our country in this way. It means a lot to me, my Kaurna ancestry and my ancestors, and this is reconciliation in action. Thank you again, Senator Wong and the committee, and let us take this powerful, sacred, healing female energy with us and for us as we journey through 2021 and beyond.
Thank you, Rosemary. The committee would like to thank our partners, sponsors and supporters, our media partner ABC Radio Adelaide, our gold sponsors, the University of Adelaide, SA Power Networks, the University of South Australia and Gaines Park Studios, silver sponsors, Flinders University, our bronze sponsors, Mott McDonald, Hoban Recruitment, SA Region of Chartered Accountants, ANZ, Genesis Care, SA Water, SAR ODL, United Nations Association of Australia, South Australia Division, and our supporters, Replica Press, Z-Form Displays and Jenny Groom Photography. We are delighted to collaborate today with the University of Adelaide to live stream today's event. It's the first year that we've had a virtual-only live stream from Adelaide to mark International Women's Day, and I'm sure you'll agree it's very different to sharing a room with over 2,500 guests as we usually do. Due to COVID-19 uncertainties, the committee made the very hard decision to host the event online this year. But it didn't stop you from supporting us though. And we have been generously sponsored again this year, and we are delighted to have sold so many tickets for this virtual stream. And the one benefit is you won't have me telling you to keep quiet, so there are small mercies. Now, the theme of this year's event is Women in Leadership. Achieving the equal future in a COVID-19 world, since the onset of the pandemic in 2020, we've seen the direct and indirect impacts on women. UN Women is working to provide support to all women on the front lines of the fight against this pandemic, promoting flexible working arrangements for women with a burden of care, and prioritising services to prevent gender-based domestic violence. Your sponsorship, ticket purchases and donations go towards this vital work, and we thank you for your support. You can continue to donate directly to UN Women Australia today by visiting the website. That's unwomen.org.au. Often we feel helpless, but this is a way that you can have direct help. Well, right now I'd like to welcome our breakfast host. The Senator for South Australia, the Honourable Penny Wong, is the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate and Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs. She's an inspirational leader and role model for young Australian women and the migrant community here in South Australia. And as we know and repeat each year, she always advocates for women and women's issues in the community. And we thank her for her continued support of the IWD breakfast, this year marking her 19th year as host. Please welcome Senator Penny Wong.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and welcome everybody. Can I first acknowledge the land we meet on today are the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to their spiritual relationship with country, and acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide and much of South Australia's region, and also acknowledge that their cultural and heritage beliefs are as important to the living Kaurna people today. And I pay respects to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people joining us from other areas in Australia. Can I first thank Rosemary Wanganeen for her wonderful and warm welcome to country. If there ever was a time we need that powerful, sacred, female, woman healing energy, it's now. So thank you very much, Rosemary, for that welcome. And I express my appreciation to all of you around South Australia joining us today. For years, the Adelaide and broader South Australian community has been coming together to make this the largest IWD breakfast in the country. And this year, because of your commitment and the dedication of the team that puts this breakfast together, we can continue to make that claim to being the biggest IWD breakfast in the country, despite all of the uncertainties of the pandemic. Now, of course, the planning for this event starts a long way out. And at the time planning began last year, we didn't have any idea of what restrictions we might all face. So the IWD Breakfast Committee determined to take this breakfast virtual, meaning we could plan with confidence and reach an even bigger audience outside of the Adelaide area. And I'm so pleased that we have so many women around the state and beyond watching this morning, including in Kimber, Kangaroo Island, women in Victoria, New South Wales, and of course our steadfast partners at the Women in Business and Regional Development in Mount Gambier, who are hosting 2 breakfasts this year. We've got watch parties from groups as diverse as the Adelaide United Women's Players, Chooks SA, a women's social enterprise group, and the United Workers Union, and many more. So thank you all for joining us this morning. Despite the logistical uncertainties and challenges of COVID, we are continuing to raise funds, and I know you will agree with me when I say they are needed more than ever this year. Later, you will hear from our wonderful and irrepressible committee chair, Anne Morgan, who will have some exciting news on how much we've raised through this virtual breakfast. But I'm going to drop just a small hint with her permission. Our sponsors, who Sonia has already thanked, have generously contributed $39,000. $39,000 that will go to the vital work of UN Women's Australia, supporting women's rights and gender equality in the Pacific and around the world. And I want to particularly mention the hosts of our live stream today, Adelaide University, who are of course a gold sponsor of this breakfast. Can I thank our committee, Anne Morgan, the wonderful chair, Asta Corbridge, Heen B. Wee, Lydia Moretti, Alexis Mackay, Sarah Hart, Larissa Harrison and Nadia Clancy. And I pay tribute to all of my staff, particularly Meredith Boyle, my intrepid office manager here in Adelaide, who is the glue that holds this event together year after year. Can I say to you all, without Anne Morgan and Meredith Boyle, this event simply would not happen, so thank you both. So there are a few reasons this year's breakfast has special meaning for me. First of all, since we last got together, we've all been through a lot, and we will never take anything like this event or so many others for granted. Secondly, I am so pleased to have Natasha as our guest speaker. Natasha and I went to uni together, here at Adelaide Uni in fact. We were occasional adversaries in student politics, but we have always been allies in feminism. Natasha was recently elected to the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the international body of experts that monitors implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. So when it comes to IWD, she has all the bases covered. And I'm looking forward to her talk this morning very much. The third reason why this year's breakfast has special meaning for me is because just last week, the South Australian Parliament has finally decriminalised abortion. And I pay tribute to everyone who has worked for so many years to ensure that South Australian women can be trusted to make choices about their own bodies. The final reason why this year's breakfast has added significance for me, and I'm sure for many of you, is because of where we are as a country right now. It has been a hard few weeks for survivors and for those who love them, for women in politics and women in leadership everywhere, for women across our community. There would hardly be a woman in this country who is not either a survivor of sexual assault or who knows someone who is. So this has been a distressing time for so many of us. I've described this as a time of searing national reckoning, a reckoning demanded by the courage of so many, of Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins and many more. And to find our way through this requires listening, and it requires action. You see, our leaders have to listen, even to messages some don't wish to hear. And we have to support those who have the courage to come forward. We have to change the culture in our parliament and across our nation. And you see, change requires more than talk. It requires action. And for this, we can draw inspiration from the next generation of leaders. We're all in awe of the work of Grace Tame, who is showing survivors everywhere the power that is within them, the power of their voice. And Chanel Contos, who has single-handedly spurred a conversation about consent education, using her voice to encourage thousands of others to tell their stories of sexual assault during school years. Ms. Contos said, "I want this to continue to be at the forefront of everyone's mind, the government's mind, because we need educational reform and societal reform. Everyone needs to be conscious of their contribution to rape culture." And her work is prompting some young men to ask questions about their own assumptions and behaviours. For example, the Year 12 student from Sydney, Asher Learmonth, who told his peers, "Don't lie to yourself. Don't make excuses. Instead, identify this sexist and reductive attitude within yourselves, within the boys you go out with. Change the way you view women." Well, Chanel Contos said this week she felt this could be a massive tipping point in our society. Well, let's prove her right. The first step in changing culture is accountability. There must be consequences for behaviour that is inappropriate or illegal. The culture of don't ask, don't tell must end. And another part of this shift is making sure there are more women at the table. One of the things I am most proud of in my time in politics is securing a change to Labor's rules that truly changed the party. In 2003, I worked with my friend Sharon Jackson from WA to ensure that more talented women got into Parliament, and we now have more women than men in the Senate. And that is the reason why the majority of senators are women for the first time in Australian history. So this International Women's Day, I call on all Australia's political parties to mandate targets for equal women's representation. Last year, Labor and the country farewelled an icon for women in Australia, Susan Ryan. She was the unstoppable force behind the Sex Discrimination Act and other nation-changing reforms as a minister in the Hawke government. Recall that before the Sex Discrimination Act, it wasn't unlawful to discriminate on the basis of sex in employment, in education, in accommodation, and the provision of goods and services. A woman's credit rating and earning capacity weren't enough to get a loan from a bank. She could only secure credit if a husband or father took responsibility. Landlords refused to rent homes to single mothers. Community clubs throughout the country were able to bar women, and women were sacked because of their age, marital status, or pregnancy. When she ran for the Senate, Susan Ryan's pitch was, "A woman's place is in the House and in the Senate." I'm sure a lot of women may have been discouraged from public life and public service and political life because of what they've seen in recent times. But my message for International Women's Day to Australian women is you are the change the culture needs. So thank you for being with us, and happy International Women's Day.
Senator Wong, thank you very much. Well, Natasha Stock-Despoja AO is the founding chair of Our Watch, the organisation to prevent violence against women and their children. We've already heard a little bit from Senator Wong about her background, but let me give you a little bit more. She's a former Senator for South Australia, former leader of the Australian Democrats, and the youngest woman to enter the federal parliament. She served as Australia's Global Ambassador for Women and Girls during the years 2013 to 2016, and in November last year, she was elected by the General Assembly of the United Nations as a member of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. She also authored the book On Violence, which was published back in March 2019, and Natasha has also served on the World Bank Gender Advisory Council between 2015 and 2017. She was also a member of the 27 UN High-Level Working Group on the Health and Human Rights of Women, Children and Adolescents. She's a non-executive director for a number of organisations, including Carrie's Beanies for Brain Cancer and the Australian Ballet. This week, doesn't stop there, this week she was awarded the National Award for Excellence in Women's Leadership from Women's Leadership Australia. I think we're all keen to hear what Natasha has to say. Please welcome her, Natasha Stott Despoja.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sonia. And of course, thank you, Rosemary, for your welcome to country. Always informative and inspiring. I too begin by acknowledging the traditional owners, the Kaurna people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to any elders from other communities who may be listening today. I also acknowledge Senator Penny Wong, who is Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator for South Australia, yes, feminist ally, and of course organiser of this wonderful breakfast. Thanks to you and your committee for this invitation. I want to pay tribute to those who champion equality and social justice in our state and beyond, especially those of you who work every day to keep women and children safe. I'm a proud product of the women's movement in South Australia, and I want to acknowledge the work of my foremothers and sisters, as well as the fact that I derive inspiration from the next generation of women in all their diversity. I've been lucky, fortunate to see firsthand the life-saving and life-changing work of UN Women, whether that's markets for change or whether it's political and economic empowerment programs in the Pacific. So I'm particularly honoured to address this breakfast, yes, in various capacities as a former senator, former diplomat, ambassador for women and girls, now as a member of CEDAW, and indeed as chair of Our Watch, a national organisation to prevent violence against women and their children. The latter means that every day I'm conscious of one of the worst manifestations of gender inequality, and that's violence against women and children. This scourge has dominated our headlines and our thoughts, our sleepless nights over the last few weeks, just as Penny has said. So it feels a bit like a bittersweet International Women's Day this year. The past few weeks have been frustrating, depressing, anger-making, and indeed triggering for many. Not only because of the allegations surrounding our nation's parliament, but the derisory reaction of our leaders. And because we know that this is symptomatic of the broader culture in a country where women are not equal and where one woman dies violently every week. So today I want to throw my arms around the women of Australia and just check everyone is okay. I want to acknowledge the bravery of survivors and send them solidarity and support and belief. So this year's International Women's Day is a call to action. Welcome to International Women's Day 2021, The Reckoning. Each year, this day is an opportunity for us to commemorate our achievements, but it's also a yearly reminder of the challenges that remain in achieving gender equality. This day can recognise the role that we all play, men, women, non-binary, gender-diverse people, working in collaboration to create a fairer, a more equal Australia. And in pushing for change, we do need to recognise we're advocating for all, equality for all women. So we need to make sure that all women from all backgrounds are represented. To paraphrase Audre Lorde, we are not free until we are all free. And women's movements have a lot to do in this regard. More work. The first International Women's Day was in New York in 1909, but it wasn't until 1975 that March 8 was adopted by the United Nations. In some countries, it's a national holiday. In fact, my kids initially assumed that's why we were having a long weekend, and were a little surprised to find out it's because of a horse race. I do know that there are some who wonder, what about an International Day for men? Well, yes, there is one, November 19, because the other 364 weren't enough, but increasingly and more seriously, that day now is about encouraging men to instill in boys the values, character and respect that is needed to create a more equal and safe world. Messages that should be transpired every day, and never more so than now. This year's theme, as you've heard, is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. Well, the aim of getting women into and supporting women in positions of power has been a lifelong passion. So the revelations in politics in the past few weeks, and indeed the report into the South Australian Parliament this week, have really given me a heavy heart. So I'm going to talk a bit about what's wrong with leadership, a bit about my experiences, but also why we need women in positions of power more than ever, just as Penny was saying. In this COVID world, women are described as the shock absorbers of the pandemic because of some of the disproportionate social and economic impacts they're experiencing. The pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities for women and girls, as well as made discrimination against previously marginalised groups, particularly those with disabilities and from poorer backgrounds. It's made it worse. It's highlighted and exacerbated existing inequalities in the home and the workplace. And we know that many women are actually on the front line as informal workers, healthcare workers, teachers. And one of the most disturbing consequences of COVID has been an increase in women's experience of violence. UN Women calls it the shadow pandemic. So to build back better from COVID, we need gender balance in leadership. Not just because it's the right thing to do or the fair thing to do, but because the research shows us COVID-19 outcomes are actually better in female-led countries. It's been shown that leadership is what drives the difference in COVID outcomes initially. And statistically, female-led countries were quicker to lock down and had fewer COVID fatalities than comparable male-led countries. Well, despite this, women only hold 24.9% of political or parliamentary positions worldwide. But the issues affecting women and girls remain one of the greatest human rights challenges. 70% of the world's poor are women. Women are far more likely to be economically dependent and work in vulnerable, low-paid and undervalued jobs. Women and children are more likely to bear the cost of food, water and fuel insecurity. Women and children are far more likely to die as a consequence of natural disasters, including as a consequence of climate change, and women are far more likely to experience violence and abuse. In Australia, well, women are still paid less for the same work as men, more likely to be engaged in part-time or casual work, have primary responsibility usually for caregiving, which includes for parents and for children, and retire with less superannuation. And of course, these situations are compounded for women from poorer, diverse and Indigenous backgrounds and women with disabilities. Women still represent less than 30% of board positions. We've gone backwards in terms of CEO positions. Only 10 CEOs in this country are women. You know, if your name is Andrew, you're more likely to be in charge of a business in Australia today than a woman. We know that women comprise of around 19% of the ADF workforce personnel, not likely to change in the near future as a consequence of recent comments by the ADF chief, I'm afraid. And Australia has fewer women in its higher ranks of government than nearly every other OECD country. We're now ranked 50th in the world for women's representation. We're behind countries like Timor-Leste, Nicaragua, Senegal, Bolivia. We're 45 places behind our near neighbour, New Zealand. And you know what? Once upon a time, South Australia led the world. We have the fine distinction of being the first place in the world to ensure women have the right to vote and stand for Parliament without caveats, yes, including Indigenous women, many of whom voted in the first 1896 election even when they were encouraged not to. You know, I think this is such a wonderful achievement. I often wonder, why is it not, you know, our slogan or on our licence plates, women getting the vote? I mean, don't get me wrong, Better by Bike, the Wine State and the Defence State all have great rings to them. But the history of women's representation in South Australia is paradoxical. Despite the passage of the suffrage bill, it took 24 years before a woman ran for Parliament and another 41 before a woman was elected here. And looking back at the Hansard and the media reports of that era, we can see that sexist sledges in politics are nothing new. Some was vitriolic, other comments were laughable. The Honourable Mr Granger decried that if women could vote, the price of broomsticks would go up. I don't know about you, Penny, but I never got to Parliament without one. And the former Mayor, Henry Fuller, feared that if women had the vote, they would win half the seats, and Mary Lee, who was the Irish-born South Australian suffragist, that she would become Premier, and he did not want such a travesty. He needn't have worried. It didn't happen, and it still hasn't happened. You know, we're the only place in Australia that's yet to have a female head of government. And we've never had an Indigenous woman elected to our Parliament. We did produce the first female Prime Minister, however. Robert Caldwell thought that women were more easily excitable than men. He worried that South Australia would become a dumping ground for strong-minded females. And Penny, haven't we? I was proud to join this cadre of strong-minded women when I entered the Senate back in 1995. But from day one, I encountered ridiculous stereotypes, sexism, harassment, and double standards that accompany all women in public life, especially in politics. Yes, my Doc Martens were infamous, but even on swearing in, my cheap purple suit got a run. On that day, the devil wore Portmans, not Prada. But I was serious about changing the perception of what constitutes a politician, you know, white, male, older, privileged. And I worked to change the policy landscape for women, particularly, but also to change the culture in the Parliament. But the past few weeks have shown that that culture is toxic, that it's requiring widespread structural, policy and cultural reform. It is time for a sweeping review of our Parliament, its practices and its culture. Contrary to some reports, I won't be leading it, but I sure will be contributing. I was only 22 when I started working in that building, and the male power and privilege was palpable. The liberties and entitlements of male colleagues was pervasive. From the married MP who pursued me as a staffer, then bullied me as a senator. The ire of MPs who thought that you were rude if you rebuffed their advances, and continual comments about appearance and, of course, sexual allusions. As a relatively young senator, the sexism and double standards, they played out in the media and in the Parliament. Many of you saw them. Like many women, I was subject to unwanted attention, harassment, comments about my appearance. You know, there was one senator who remarked constantly, "Why don't you wear skirts more? Show off your legs." I was accosted by leering businessmen, and the pleas to colleagues to intervene were often ignored. I still bristle at the gall of one Senate aspirant who, on meeting me for the first time, picked me up and kissed me inappropriately. And I still cower when I think of being alone in a corridor once with an angry male colleague. But then, being called precious or princess or humorless feminist if you complained. And even some journalists, some of whom now, thankfully, call out the sexism in that building, they used or they repeated sexist slurs about women colleagues, about my party, even me. Yes, you could rent us by the hour, and I was a media whore. The novelty of being young and female underscored these experiences, but no woman is exempt, and these experiences are compounded for women from Indigenous background, women of colour, trans women, lesbian women, and those with disabilities. All of those groups are profoundly underrepresented in our nation's powerful institutions, and their injustices are often ignored, along with those of older women, the fastest growing group in poverty. While the trivialisation, harassment, even abuse of women in parliament or politics is nothing new, what is new are the movements that are calling them out. And look at the impassioned leadership we've seen from our Australian of the Year. Penny mentioned Grace Tame of Let Her Speak. Grace has shone a light on these uncomfortable truths and highlighted the need for legislative and cultural reform. I hope she will be addressing the Parliament soon. But as horrible and distressing as these stories are, they're breaching the wall of secrecy, smashing secrecy, and Australia is starting to see and understand the depth and the prevalence of women's suffering in this nation. Grace has shown how this is about power and culture, and if we want to achieve an Australia free of violence against women, then we have to challenge the historically entrenched beliefs and behaviours that drive it, and the social, political and economic structures, practices and systems that support it. And we know the main drivers of such violence include condoning violence against women, rigid gender stereotypes, limits to women's independence, and male peer relationships that emphasise aggression and disrespect women. The evidence shows gender inequality is the core of this problem, but gender equality is at the heart of the solution. And I know gender equality is not the same thing for all women. Racism, colonisation, transphobia, homophobia, ableism, all these and other forms of discrimination and disadvantage intersect with gender equality to make the effect of violence against women different for different groups. That's why we need an intersectional approach. We know women usually experience violence at the hands of someone they know, sometimes for a long period, sometimes even for a lifetime. This is the reality for 1 in 4 women over the age of 15 in Australia. This violence is perpetrated against women of all backgrounds, young, old, women of colour, lesbian, trans women, and women with disabilities. We know that Indigenous women experience violence at 3 times the rate of non-Indigenous women, and this is our nation's particular shame. The good news? The violence is preventable. But we all have a role to play in creating an Australia in women are not only safe, but they're treated as equals and respected in public and private life. We need to take action in all the places where we live, love, learn, work and play. As individuals, call out sexist or derogatory behaviour at home, work, social situations. As parents and caregivers, we can actually not treat children differently based on their gender, and we can model gender equality in our homes. Grace is right. Respectful relationships education must be in all schools, but not only the definition of what constitutes consent, but the necessary respect that underpins it, with a whole of school approach to gender equality demonstrated in the curriculum by teachers and a genuine commitment to gender equality embedded in the DNA of the school and its community. And I don't forget, this applies to sporting codes as well. If we're to minimise the risk of violence in our workplaces and provide a supportive environment for victims, then we must take positive actions to create equal and respectful workplaces, and this includes in our parliaments. Not only because women deserve a respectful and safe work environment, but because there's actually a proven connection between women in leadership and greater efforts to address violence against women. More women in leadership leads to improved distribution of resources, maintenance of public infrastructure, and even makes a difference to measures as simple as profit and loss. Increased women in leadership positions changes the perceptions and the roles and aspirations of girls, especially in developing countries. It means they'll do fewer household chores, more likely to go to school, and themselves become equipped to play a role in leadership, including in conflict prevention. We can't be what we can't see. When I entered the Senate all those years ago, most of the messages I received were from young women and girls who said to me, "If you can do it, so can I." I suspect that's Penny's experience as well. So when Grace Tame categorically ruled out at the Press Club on Wednesday running for Parliament, I have to admit, my heart sank a little. Her exact quote was, "No." So I don't think there was room for mitigation, but we'll work on it. And not because I don't realise you can't make a difference through other avenues. Obviously, not-for-profits and civil society and non-government organisations, unions, social movements, they are so important, sometimes more important. But I don't want to think that we're going to lose these women, or the passionate and the principled. A Plan International report, She Can Lead, actually surveyed 18 to 25-year-old girls and asked them, women, would they run for office, and 0% said they wanted a career in Parliament. Critical mass is one thing, but gender parity is another. And at this rate, we're not going to achieve it in Parliament for decades. It's time for quotas. It's time for quotas by the next election. It was time for quotas decades ago. It's time for men to give up some power, to share their power, to share it properly. And that means literally giving up your seat for a woman. I'm not sure if the hashtag giving up my seat's going to go viral today, but it's long overdue. And I want women to support each other. Cross-party women's caucus. Some of us have tried. I know that we're not homogeneous. And I know that some women will align themselves with the powerful in order to survive, but overall, when we work together, we work better. And some of my favourite examples and best examples of leadership and policy were when women worked together across the aisle, whether it was on the successful RU 486 vote or transparency in pregnancy, counselling, advertising, or even stem cells. And as Penny has pointed out, this week in South Australia, women worked across the lines, across the aisle, hand in hand with civil society, specifically the South Australian Abortion Action Coalition, to remove abortion from the criminal code. This is wonderful. So I knew as a legislator, with the stroke of a pen, or these days with the click of a keyboard, you can change lives, and women's lives, for the better. So my message, like Penny's, my message is to young women. Take over Parliament. Don't give up on Parliament because it looks like Parliament's given up on us. As I said in my first speech, I look forward to the day when I look across this chamber from my seat and see such a diversity of faces, young people, old people, different ages, men, women, and the many cultures that make up this nation, including Indigenous cultures, that we don't even have to strive for it. Friends, the challenges that we're still striving to address in Australia are a common story for women across the globe. Indeed, these challenges are magnified in many countries, particularly in our region. The challenges to women's representation in political spheres are mirrored across the board in subnational decision-making, in economic life, in financial and digital inclusion, and in social and family affairs. No country in the world has achieved gender equality, and yet no country, no community, regardless of its circumstances, can reach its full potential while drawing on the skills of only half its population. This is not women's business, this is everybody's business. And my message to men who may be watching or listening today is you need to engage with this. It shouldn't be up to women to fight for gender equality only. Men, you have the power and you need to use it for good. You need to step up, be allies, advocate change. So Sonia, this breakfast has many fond memories for me. As a young suffrage centenary committee member a long time ago, I was a warm-up act at one of these breakfasts. And since then I've heard so many empowering speeches, thought-provoking speeches, and I thank Senator Crowley, former Senator Crowley, and Senator Penny Wong for bringing them to us. I have to say though, March 6, 2008 was a bit of a highlight because I went from breakfast to hospital to have my daughter Cordelia, who is here today. Yes, I was aiming for March 8th. Okay, I didn't quite make it. But tomorrow we will celebrate Cordelia's 13th birthday, and we will reflect on, yes, how fortunate she is to be growing up in this country, in this era, but knowing that she does not enjoy the same rights or safety as her brother Conrad, and that her many sisters in Australia and around the globe are not as privileged as she. On this International Women's Day, I encourage her, as I do you, to keep in mind how far we've come, as well as, yes, be appalled by the slowness of change, the pain of injustice, and the remaining challenges. Everyone, we should rejoice in small victories, but given the momentum of the past few weeks, I think we are now on the way to big victories, despite taking on the most powerful in the land. So, happy International Women's Day 2021. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anne Morgan. I am the chair of the Adelaide International Women's Day Breakfast Committee. Before I get into my few words, though, we've all been keeping really quiet here, our little group in our room this morning. We don't have 2,500 people to applaud Natasha for that fantastic speech, but I think we do need to take a minute and applaud her around Adelaide, around Australia, and say congratulations and thank you, Natasha. It is my pleasure to thank Natasha for accepting our invitation and Penny's invitation to speak to us today. As she said, Natasha's been attending for a very long time, and it's always great to see you at our events, Natasha, but especially today to have you as our special guest speaker. Your speech was very honest and compelling. You have lived this every day, and you continue to do it, and you continue to support women every day on Twitter and in person and in every other format that you're on. It is fantastic. It is admirable. Who knows, I might take a leaf out of Mary Lee's branch and go for the first Irish South Australian Premier. Maybe not. There are a few other people, though, that I do want to acknowledge for making this morning's event possible. Senator Wong, Penny, thank you again for hosting today's breakfast and for providing your support and your fantastic staff to assist the committee. Sonia and Auntie Rosemary, thank you for joining us this morning, and also to our fabulous Auslan interpreters, Sarah and Nikki. We're working them really hard today. Thank you also to my fellow committee members who have helped organise today's event, in particular our wonderful Executive Officer Meredith. When in the early days of planning for today's event, we were faced with that really difficult decision. Do we risk holding a face-to-face event, or do we go fully virtual? And given the uncertainties with COVID-19 at that time, we spent many hours deliberating what to do, and we finally opted to have a virtual event. Our preparation for today has been very different to previous years. We haven't spent hours poring over seating charts for 2,500 guests and moving everybody around so everyone had a seat. But instead, our efforts have been focused on working for our guests to make sure that we can give you the best possible virtual International Women's Day event. And we didn't really know how ticket sales would go either. We had all of our fingers and toes crossed, but when we sold over 250 tickets in the first 15 minutes, we were so pleased. And that continued to grow. We were certainly breaking out the happy dances when we hit 1,000 tickets sold a couple of weeks ago. And that has continued to grow over the last few days. And we reached 1,272 virtual tickets sold when we closed sales on Wednesday. Thank you all for purchasing your tickets and for joining us this morning in many locations like Kimba and Kangaroo Island and all around Australia. And I think there might be some people in Ireland as well watching. It is wonderful, though, to be able to reach you and to be able to expand our reach to everyone this morning. We're also overjoyed that our sponsors are willing to support us again for 2021 in this different format. And in fact, we are really happy to be able to start working with some new sponsors this year. The University of Adelaide in particular have been outstanding this year by helping us with the live stream from their North Terrace campus as part of their sponsorship. In particular, Alexis and Tanya. Thank you both. I'm delighted this morning to tell you that the Adelaide International Women's Day Breakfast Committee has committed to donating at least $60,000 just from this morning's event to UN Women Australia. This donation will be used to help empower women as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as agents of change in Fiji, Vanuatu, and the Solomon Islands through UN Women's Markets for Change project. On the 8th of March, you can also support this project by donating on the UN Women's inaugural day of giving. And for that one day, on Monday, the 8th of March, every dollar is going to be doubled. So that's a great opportunity to donate to this wonderful project. 2020 was a hard year for everyone. We had no idea last year what was in store for us, and we certainly were not prepared for COVID-19. In particular, though, women were hit really hard. And there are a lot of women that are employed in the frontline jobs that were impacted. Our nurses, our medical staff, teachers, carers, cleaners, hospitality workers, it's a humongous list. And after a hard day of work, a lot of those women came home and took on the lion's share of the household work as well. It was really hard, and it is still really hard, and we are all really, really tired. For workplaces, there are budget cuts in some of the key areas like professional development, team building, equity, and diversity support. But lack of budget is not a good reason to stop supporting women in their progress for change. It is really important that we don't stop now. We have just begun to see the change that's happening, and we need to continue to build that and to increase our organisations so they're more open and forward-thinking and inclusive. While travel to interstate conferences might not be an option, you could consider working together to support and encourage women in their roles. You could host internal mentoring programs or networking morning teas or brown bag lunches. And you can support women to work from home where they need to. We all did it for months last year, and the research actually shows that we were probably more productive when we were working from home than when we were in the workplace. I know I certainly enjoyed not having to drive in and out of work every day. I'm really inspired by Amanda Gorman's poem, We Rise. And this, I think, sums up beautifully how important it is and why it is important to support and empower women today and every day. I'm going to go with the first few lines, and you can look it up afterwards to hear the full thing. Today, everyone's eyes are on us as we rise. Today is the day women are paving the way, speaking our truth to power. In this hour, it is our duty to find the brave beauty in rooting for other women, so they too know we are not victims. We are victors, the great predictors for progress. We press for change. In closing, I want to say one last time, thank you all so much for your support. To say that Adelaide has not let us down this year is an understatement. This committee, we are so grateful for your support, and we hope that we have been able to give you the best virtual International Women's Day breakfast. We can't wait to see you all back face to face in March 2022. And then we're going to celebrate 30 years of Adelaide International Women's Day breakfast in true style. Thank you all very much.
Oh, thank you, Anne. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Natasha. And thank you to you all for attending the 2021 Adelaide International Women's Day breakfast. Now, if like me, you wanted more of Natasha with that great presentation she made to us today. You can get more. There is a special one-on-one interview with ABC Radio Adelaide's Brekkie presenter Ali Clark, and she will be joining and talking with Natasha Stott-Despoja live on ABC Adelaide Instagram, a live feed. That will get underway around 10:30 today. So, as I said, if like me, you just want more, you'll be able to get it that way. And they will be taking your questions as well. So, an opportunity that maybe you haven't had at this point. You can support UN Women, as Anne said, by donating on the Giving Day on the 8th of March. That's this Monday. Go to unwomen.org.au for more details. And we've all been separate today, but you can kind of come together with your photos. Wherever you are, or however you're marking this International Women's Day breakfast, show us your photos from today's event and other information you can find on the committee's website and social media accounts. Use the hashtag IWD2021 and hashtag WomenLead. But for now, wherever you are, enjoying your breakfast. We hope it's been a great morning. We certainly thank all of those who've helped us bring it to you. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and most importantly, happy International Women's Day for Monday, March 8.